The sun hung low over the ocean, like a promise it intended to keep, painting the sky in strokes of gold and rose. Johnny stood barefoot on the cool, damp sand, the waves whispering secrets at his feet. He had come to the beach to escape the noise in his head, the endless cycle of lectures, assignments, and the quiet ache of feeling unseen. His backpack lay beside him, a worn copy of poetry peeking out. At 21, he had learned to hide behind books and silence, but tonight something in the air felt different, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for one small moment to change everything. A little farther down the shore, a girl sat on a faded blue blanket, her easel propped against a driftwood log. She was painting the sunset with slow, deliberate brushes, her dark hair catching the last light. Sophia. He didn't know her name yet, but he would never forget the way she tilted her head, as if listening to the colors themselves. She wore a simple white dress that fluttered in the sea breeze, and her bare feet were half buried in the sand. For a long moment, Johnny just watched, not in a way that felt intrusive, but in the way one watches a quiet miracle unfolding. Their eyes met across the distance. She smiled, soft and unguarded, and something inside his chest shifted, like a page turning in a story he hadn't realized he was living. He looked away first, cheeks warm, and pretended to read. But the words on the page blurred. Every few minutes his gaze drifted back to her. She didn't seem to mind. When the sun finally slipped below the horizon, leaving streaks of lavender and amber, she packed up her things slowly, as if reluctant to leave the moment behind. As she walked past him toward the boardwalk, she paused. "You were watching the painting," she said, her voice gentle, like wind over water. "Not the sunset." Johnny blinked, caught. "Both, I think. It looked alive." She laughed softly, the sound carrying on the breeze. "That's the nicest thing anyone said about my work in weeks. I'm Sophia." "Johnny." They stood there for a heartbeat longer than strangers usually do. Then she gave a small wave and continued on, leaving footprints that the tide would soon erase. But the impression she left on him stayed. The next evening, he returned to the same stretch of beach. He told himself it was for the quiet, for the reading. But when he saw her easel already set up in almost the same spot, his heart gave a quiet, hopeful thud. She looked up as he approached, and this time her smile was brighter, like she had been waiting too. "You came back," she said. "So did you." They didn't talk much at first. He sat a respectful distance away, opening his book. She painted. The silence between them felt comfortable, like an old friendship that had simply been paused for a while. Every so often she would glance over, and he would catch her eye and look down quickly, smiling to himself. Small, caring moments began to weave themselves into their evenings. One night she offered him half of the apple she was eating. Another time, he brought an extra blanket when the wind turned cool and draped it gently over her shoulders without a word. She thanked him with a look that made the whole beach feel warmer. Days turned into weeks. Their meetings became the quiet center of their worlds. Sophia told him about her art, how painting wasn't just a hobby, but the only way she knew to translate the feelings words couldn't hold. Johnny shared how books had been his refuge since he lost his mother 2 years earlier, how stories kept him company when the house felt too empty. They never rushed. Their love grew in the spaces between sentences, in the way he remembered the exact shade of blue she was searching for in her paint box, in the way she noticed when his shoulders tensed and offered a simple, rough day that somehow made everything lighter. One golden afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent, Sophia set her brush down and turned to him fully. "Walk with me?" she asked. They strolled along the water's edge, waves licking at their ankles. The sky was putting on its most breathtaking show, fiery oranges melting into soft pinks and deep indigos. Johnny felt the words rising in his throat before he could stop them. "I've never told anyone this," he said quietly, "but I used to come here with my mom when I was little. She'd make me promise that no matter how far life took me, I'd always come back to watch one sunset a year and remember that some things stay beautiful, even when everything else changes." Sophia stopped walking. The wind played with her hair as she looked at him, eyes shining with unshed tears. That's the most beautiful promise I've ever heard. They stood shoulder to shoulder as the sun kissed the horizon. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Years of quiet loneliness meeting years of gentle hope. Johnny reached out and took her hand. It was the first time they had touched, and the simplicity of it felt sacred. "I don't want to make promises I can't keep," he said, voice barely above the waves. "But if you'll let me, I'd like to promise you something right here. Every time the sun sets like this, I'll be here. Or if I can't be here physically, I'll be here in the way that matters. Thinking of you, rooting for you, believing in the kind of love that doesn't need grand gestures. Just this, us, real and steady." Sophia turned to him, the last light catching in her eyes. "I promise the same. No matter where life pulls us, college, jobs, distance, I'll carry this sunset with me. And I'll carry you." She squeezed his hand, and they watched the final sliver of sun disappear, the sky now a canvas of stars beginning to wake. It wasn't dramatic. There were no fireworks or sweeping declarations, just two hearts choosing each other in the softest, most honest way possible. Over the following months, their bond deepened in quiet, meaningful ways. Johnny started bringing his favorite poems and reading them aloud while she painted. Sophia began sketching him when he wasn't looking, small, tender portraits that captured the way his eyes softened when he spoke about his dreams. They shared picnics on the blanket, laughter that echoed over the water, and long conversations about everything and nothing. There were gentle tensions too, the kind that come when two people care so deeply they're afraid of messing it up. Once, after a particularly hard exam week, Johnny showed up exhausted and distant. Sophia didn't push. She simply sat beside him, painting in silence until he was ready to talk. In that patience, he realized how much he loved her, not the loud, cinematic kind of love, but the steady, breathing kind that shows up even on ordinary Tuesdays. There were two more touching moments that would stay with them forever. The first came on a cloudy evening when the sunset was muted and gray. Johnny arrived to find Sophia staring at her blank canvas, frustrated. "It's not coming out right today," she whispered. Without thinking, he picked up a brush, dipped it in soft gold, and added a single streak across the top. "Even on gray days," he said, "there's still light if you look for it." She stared at the stroke, then at him, and the realization hit them both at once. They were no longer two separate people painting their own pictures. They were creating something together. The second moment arrived weeks later, when Sophia received news that her father's health was declining and she might need to move back home, hours away from the beach, from college, from Johnny. She told him on their blanket, voice trembling. He listened without interrupting, then pulled her close, resting his chin on her hair. "Then we'll make new promises," he said. "Sunsets look different everywhere, but the feeling stays the same. I'll drive to you on weekends. You'll paint wherever you are. And every single night, wherever we are, we'll look at the sky at the same time and know the other person is doing the same. That's our promise now, not just one beach. Everywhere." She cried then, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming certainty that she had found someone who understood that love wasn't about staying in the same place. It was about choosing each other, no matter where the tide took them. Time passed gently. Sophia did move, but the promise held. Johnny graduated and found a quiet job at a bookstore near the coast. Every Friday evening, he drove the long highway to her new town, and every Sunday, they found a new beach, a new hill, or even just a rooftop to watch the sun go down. Their love remained pure and slow burning, built on stolen glances that had become knowing looks, unspoken feelings that had become quiet conversations, and small, caring moments that had grown into a lifetime of devotion. Years later, on the exact beach where it all began, Johnny stood once more with Sophia beside him. The sun was setting in the same glorious way it had that first evening. He took her hand, now adorned with a simple ring he had given her the week before. Remember the promise? He asked. She smiled, the same soft, unguarded smile that had once stopped his heart across the sand. Every day since. As the sky blazed its farewell, they stood together, not as two lonely souls who happened to meet, but as two hearts that had chosen to build something real, something lasting, something pure. The waves rolled in, carrying their story forward, and the sunset whispered its approval. And in that moment, the world felt exactly as it should, peaceful, dreamy, and full of the kind of love that doesn't need to shout to be heard.